All right, let's talk about something that's literally all around us, but honestly, kind of scary sounding: radiation. Today, we're going to demystify this whole thing. We're going to swap out that fear for some solid facts so you can get a real handle on the risks we actually face and maybe the ones we worry about a little too much, just by going about our day.
So, to kick things off, let's play a little game to check our gut feelings. Which one of these do you think bombards you with more radiation? Taking a long flight across the Atlantic, or smoking a pack of cigarettes every single day for a whole year? Go on, take a guess. The answer is, well, it's pretty surprising, and it really gets to the core of what we're digging into today.
Okay, before we can even answer that, we've got to get on the same page. We need to know what scientists are even talking about when they use the word radiation in the context of risk. And look, when you see safety warnings or hear about limits, they are almost always talking about one specific kind: ionizing radiation. This is the heavy hitter, the high-energy stuff that has enough power to literally knock little pieces off your atoms and mess with your cells.
Yeah, see, the word radiation itself is this massive umbrella. It covers everything from the light from your lamp to, gamma rays from space. So the first thing we absolutely have to do is draw a big, clear line in the sand.
So it all boils down to one simple thing: energy. On one side, you've got the big guns, ionizing radiation. I want you to picture these as teeny tiny microscopic cannonballs. They have enough oomph to blast into your cells and potentially damage your DNA directly. That's what all the safety regulations are built around. Then on the other side, you have non-ionizing radiation. This is your Wi-Fi, your phone, your microwave. It's much, much lower energy. It interacts with us differently, and frankly, the science there is still a hot topic. So for today, we're zeroing in on the one we know a ton about, that high-energy ionizing radiation.
Okay, so how do we even compare the radiation from, say, an X-ray to the radiation from eating a banana? Yes, bananas are radioactive. We'll get to that. We need a single unit, right? And that unit is the millisievert, or MSV for short. You're going to hear that a lot. Just think of it like this. It's a score of how much biological punch a dose of radiation has. The higher the millisievert number, the bigger the potential impact on your body. Simple as that. All right, so now we have our unit, the millisievert. So the million-dollar question is, how many of these are we soaking up every day, just, existing? And believe me, this is where what we think we know about radiation gets turned completely upside down. Check this out. Every year, on average, every single one of us gets a dose of about 2.4 millisieverts. And this is from totally natural stuff you can't do anything about. But look at this chart for a second. The biggest chunk of that pie, almost half of your entire yearly dose, isn't coming from cosmic rays or what you eat. No, it's coming from something else.
Believe it or not, the single biggest source of your annual radiation dose is probably your own house. Yep, it's from something called radon, which is a totally natural radioactive gas that just seeps up from the ground and can get trapped inside our homes. This is just a perfect example of what we're talking about. What we think is risky versus what actually is, they're often worlds apart. For most of us, the biggest dose is literally coming from the ground we live on.
The truth is, this background radiation is just part of the deal of living on Earth. It's unavoidable. The soil under your feet, it's got uranium in it. The food you eat, that banana I mentioned has potassium-40, which is radioactive. Heck, we are radioactive. We've got carbon-14 inside of us right now. This isn't meant to freak you out. It's just the wallpaper of our planet. It's the baseline.
Okay, so we've got our baseline, 2.4 millisieverts a year. Now for the fun part. Let's start comparing that number to some other things, some natural, some not so natural. This is where it gets really interesting.
All right, let's talk about medicine. Medical scans are, for most of us, the biggest source of artificial radiation we'll ever get. But look at the crazy range here. A dental X-ray? It's basically nothing. Less than a single day of just walking around. But then you look at something like a PET CT scan. Bam! That's over 10 years' worth of natural background radiation all in one sitting. It shows you how doctors are always weighing the benefits against the risks, right?
And now, drumroll please, the answer to that first question we asked: flying versus smoking. A flight across the pond gives you a tiny little dose of about 0.08 millisieverts. It's a whole-body dose from cosmic rays way up there. But smoking? A heavy smoker can get up to a whopping 160 millisieverts a year. And here's the kicker. That dose isn't spread out. It's an intense, concentrated blast delivered right to the sensitive cells in your lungs, all thanks to polonium-210 in the tobacco. So yeah, it's not even close.
Okay, now get ready for this number. 260 millisieverts.
To put that in perspective, that's over 100 times the average dose we all get in a year. And no, this isn't from some kind of accident. It's not from a hospital. This is the annual dose some people living in a city called Ramsar in Iran get every single year, just from being there. What's going on? Well, the local hot springs are super rich in radioactive elements. They bubble up to the surface, and over centuries, that material has been used to build their houses. It's created the highest natural background radiation spot on the entire planet. For scientists, it's this incredible real-world laboratory for studying what happens with long-term exposure.
Okay, so we've been throwing a lot of numbers around, from super tiny to, well, huge. But here's the question that really matters, right? At what point does it actually get dangerous? Where's the line?
Well, the science on this is actually pretty clear. Global regulators have set limits. For you and me, the general public, the limit from artificial sources, so on top of that natural background dose, is a very conservative 1 millisievert a year. If you work with this stuff, say you're an X-ray tech, the limit's higher, up at 50. But the really important number is this one, above 100 millisieverts. That's the level where we have hard data, actual evidence, showing a small but statistically real increase in cancer risk for a population.
So what's the philosophy here? Well, scientists are super cautious. They use a model called linear no threshold. It's a fancy name for a simple idea. They basically assume that if a big dose is definitely bad, then any tiny dose must be a tiny bit bad too. There's no magical safe number where the risk just vanishes. The whole game is about managing risk and keeping any extra exposure as low as we possibly can.
So if we're all swimming in this ocean of natural radiation every day, and we had these really clear safety lines, why are we so afraid of it? Why does the word radiation just make our hair stand on end? Well, the answer isn't really in the science, it's in our heads.
You see, our collective fear of radiation was basically born from a handful of really, really bad days in history. Think about it. Nuclear testing in the 50s, Chernobyl, Fukushima. These were huge, terrifying, high-dose events. And they're so dramatic that they've burned themselves into our brains. So now our minds take a shortcut. We hear radiation and we immediately think catastrophe. And that completely blots out the much more boring reality of the tiny, low-level dose we get every single day.
So where does that leave us? What's the takeaway here? As we move into a future that's only going to have more tech, more scans, more stuff, how should we think about all this?
I think the most important thing to remember is this. The science of protecting people from that high-energy ionizing radiation is really solid. It's a mature field. We've got international groups that do nothing but review the data and update the guidelines. Now, for the non-ionizing stuff, the Wi-Fi and cell phones, that's a different story, with different science, and it's still evolving. But for the kind of radiation we've been talking about today, the system is robust and it works.
So we started out by testing your gut feeling. And I hope that along the way, we've managed to swap some of that vague fear for some concrete facts. Look, the point isn't to stop being careful, it's to be smart about it. It's about calibrating our sense of risk so we understand the vast difference between eating a banana and, a nuclear meltdown. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. In a world that's getting more complex every day, how do we make sure we balance all the amazing things technology gives us with a really clear-eyed scientific understanding of risk, free from all the hype and fear? Thank you for joining this explainer.